At my company retreat, my boss stood up during dinner and said, "One of you isn't who you say you are." The conference room went dead silent. Forks stopped midair. Someone's wine glass hit the table a little too hard. My boss, Gerald, was standing at the head of the table with his hands pressed flat against the wood, scanning each of our faces like he was counting us. We were a small tech startup, only 12 employees total, and this retreat was supposed to be a celebration. We just closed our funding 2 weeks ago. "I'm not joking," Gerald continued. "Someone in this room has been lying about their credentials, and I found out this afternoon." My stomach dropped. I'd been working at the company for 8 months as a senior developer, and my resume was solid, but I also knew that my college transcripts had a discrepancy I'd never bothered to correct. A clerical error listed my graduation date as 2019 instead of 2018. It was minor, but if someone dug deep enough, they could claim I lied. I glanced around the table. Everyone looked equally terrified. Liam, our lead designer, was sweating through his shirt. He told us he worked at Apple before joining our startup, but I'd never actually seen proof of that, just his word. Our CFO, Janet, had her hand over her mouth. She'd mentioned an MBA from Wharton during her interview, and Gerald had hired her on the spot. Then there was Priya, our operations manager, who claimed fluency in 6 languages. I'd only ever heard her speak English and broken Spanish. Gerald walked around the table slowly. "I hired all of you based on trust, based on what you told me. And now I'm finding out that one of you fabricated a major part of your background." He stopped behind Janet's chair. She went pale. "It's not me," she whispered. Gerald didn't move. "Then who is it?" Nobody spoke. He pulled out his phone and set it on the table. "I have the proof right here. Someone's LinkedIn profile doesn't match their actual work history. Someone claimed experience they never had." I watched Liam shift in his seat. His leg was bouncing under the table so hard it was shaking his water glass. Then Gerald moved. He walked past Janet, past Liam, past Priya. He stopped behind Kyle, our junior developer. Kyle was 23, fresh out of college, and the quietest person on the team. "Kyle," Gerald said, "you told me you had 2 years of professional coding experience before joining us." Kyle's voice came out thin. "I do." "Really? Because I called your previous employer this afternoon. They've never heard of you." Kyle's face crumpled. "That's not possible. I worked there for 18 months. Gerald held up his phone. "The company you listed doesn't exist. I checked the business registry. There's no record of it." Kyle stood up so fast his chair fell backward. No, you're wrong. I worked at TechBridge Solutions. I have emails. I have pay stubs. Show me." Kyle fumbled with his phone, scrolling frantically. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it twice. Then he found something and shoved the screen toward Gerald. "Here, see? Emails from my manager. My direct deposit confirmations." Gerald took the phone and studied it for a long moment. His expression didn't change. "These are real," Gerald admitted. Kyle's whole body sagged with relief. "But they're not from TechBridge Solutions," Gerald continued. "They're from TechBridge Consulting. 2 completely different companies." The room was silent again. Kyle's voice cracked. "What's the difference? I still work there. I still have the experience." "The difference," Gerald said slowly, "is that TechBridge Consulting went bankrupt 18 months ago, right around the time you claimed you were working for TechBridge Solutions." I watched Kyle's face cycle through confusion, then understanding, then horror. "I didn't lie," Kyle said. "I swear I didn't. I worked there under that name. They told me the company was called TechBridge Solutions." Gerald's expression softened slightly. "Did you ever receive a W-2? Kyle shook his head. "They paid me as a contractor. Cash deposits." "Cash deposits," Gerald repeated. "For a tech company." That's when it clicked for me. I'd heard about this scam before. Fake startups that hire junior developers, pay them under the table, then fold before anyone realizes the company was never legitimate. The developers walk away thinking they have real experience, but there's no verifiable record. Gerald sat down. "Kyle, you're not a liar. You're a victim. Someone scammed you and you didn't know it." Kyle dropped back into his chair. He looked like he might throw up. Gerald continued. "But this is a problem, because it means you don't actually have the professional experience you thought you had. Everything you learned there, all your references, they're worthless on paper." I expected Gerald to fire him right there. Instead, Gerald pulled out a folder, which is why I spent the last 3 hours putting together a remediation plan. "You're good at what you do, Kyle. I've seen your work. So, here's what's going to happen." He slid the folder across the table. "You're going to take a certification course on the company's dime. You're going to document every project you've completed here. And in 6 months, you'll have legitimate, verifiable experience that no one can question." Kyle stared at the folder like it might disappear. "I don't understand," he whispered. "You're not firing me?" Gerald shook his head. "I'm fixing the problem. Because that's what leaders do." He stood up and looked around the table at the rest of us. "Let this be a lesson. If any of you have skeletons in your closet, now's the time to come clean. I'd rather help you fix it than find out later." Nobody said anything. Gerald sat back down and picked up his fork. "Now let's eat. This steak is getting cold."